guys, it's Tahira, and today I'm doing my January wrap up. I also moved my bookshelves into a different location. I feel like you can't even tell, but the natural light in here is just so much better, and I actually get sunlight in this room like during the day. The rest of my apartment is usually so dark, but this is the one place where I get so much natural light, so I decided to move my shelves in here. But yes, this is my January wrap up. So all of the books that I read in the month of January. Honestly, January was such a great reading month for me, and I started off so strong. I set my reading goal to 50 books this year, and I've already read 10 books in the month of January. So truly we are starting off so well, and I really want to keep this reading momentum going for the rest of the year. And 10 books is like so unusual for me. And the reason that is because I read 5 of those were graphic novels, but I'm still gonna count them. Still 10 books. So before we jump into the actual books that I read, I'm just gonna list off a few stats of the genres and pages that I read this month. So I read 3 fantasy romance, 1 thriller, and 6 romance. So like a mix of genres, a lot of fantasy, a lot of romance, and that's because I read the graphic novels I read were all romance, and since I read a bunch of them, the romance category is like a lot bigger than it usually would be. But all of that comes to a total of 4,167 pages, which is so much more than I usually read, but off to a great start, like I said. So the very first book I read for the month of January and for the year of 2025 was The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This one was a super anticipated read for me. I've heard nothing but great things about this, and I feel like it was hyped so much like over the last year and even more, and I heard like so many good things about it, and I finally decided to pick it up because I felt like it wouldn't be a 5-star like for me, but I thought like it would be a pretty good chance of me liking it. But in the end, I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. As for the positives, I really loved the world and the whole vampire lore and all the mythology behind it. I thought all the vampires were really interesting, and I'm realizing that I feel like I want to read more vampire books, and I haven't really read a lot, so that's definitely something I'm interested in looking into more and reading more vampire books. But as for that, yeah, I definitely was super interested in that aspect of it and wanted to know more. So this book is about this girl named Araya, and she is a human, but she has grown up and been raised among vampires. Her father is like the king, I guess, of where they are. He kind of found her when she was really little, and he decided to raise her, and she entered into this competitions with trials, which is kind of designed and held by this goddess Nyaxia, who's kind of the mother of all vampires, and she kind of rules them, and she's like the big deity that they follow. So she's sort of the creator of these trials slash competition, and whoever ends up winning gets like whatever they want from her. They get one wish and she will grant it. And so Araya joins this trial competition thing because she wants to turn into a vampire. Because she's human, it's like pretty dangerous for her because vampires feed on humans, and she always has to be careful because her blood could always be a trigger for a vampire to come after her. And then during the trial, she meets this man named Rain, and they sort of create like this unlikely alliance slash friendship, and they kind of work together for a lot of the trials and develop their relationship. Obviously it turns into a romance. The trials themselves honestly felt like not really super high stakes. They felt kind of short, and it didn't feel like there was a lot of tension. I was never really scared that someone wouldn't make it out alive. I guess that's the thing with fantasy novels, where during the trials it's like sort of in the early stages, at least you kind of know what's gonna happen, like you know they're gonna make it through, and it's the author has to kind of work to make you feel like that danger is there and make you feel like these trials are dangerous and that it's gonna be impossible to get out of a situation. And I feel like I never really had that experience, and I feel like that's bad because most of the book is so like focused on the trials, and it's such a big part of the story that I just wish there was like more stakes added to that aspect of it so that I could actually feel the danger and actually feel like I'm gonna lose someone. And along with the trials feeling kind of short, I also felt like the time between the trials was dragged out super long, and it felt like really slow. Between each trial there was probably around 3 weeks, and I feel like that's a pretty long time. I don't know why like authors try to keep trials like so separated out. I guess that's to give time for the people to recover between trials, but still, like I feel like I feel like time needs to be shortened up a little bit because the time between trials just ends up dragging out a lot, and this was the same way. I wish things were just a little bit faster, and that ended up bringing down my rating a little bit, but overall I really enjoyed the story, and I am interested based on like the ending to see how the second book goes, and I'm hoping to read the sequel soon. Then I read All In by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this is the third book in the Natural series. If you don't know, the Natural series is a super popular like YA crime mystery thriller series, and honestly it's like my new obsession. I love this series so much. The best way that I've seen people describe it, and I feel like it's the perfect description, is that it's Criminal Minds but with teenagers. And although I never was someone who like religiously watched Criminal Minds, I was always super interested in their cases, and whenever one was on I would like always enjoy my time watching it, and I've just loved reading this series. It's so entertaining. It's kind of hard to talk about a book like this because it's the third book in a series. Ooh. But I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I loved this one so much in particular. So this book follows a lot of like tracking serial killer stuff, and they're always usually trying to follow and track down a different serial killer in each book. And in this one, the whole mystery clue thing aspect of it was so intricate, and honestly it left me confused a little bit towards the end. Like I did not know what was going on. Everyone in this book is so much smarter than I am, and they were picking up on stuff that I never would have and putting together points in a way that I never would have. And each of the characters in the book have different like affinities. So for example, our main character Cassie, she's really good at reading people, and when she's a profiler, so when she looks at someone like based on what they're wearing, how they're acting, she can pretty much pinpoint exactly like what type of person they are. And the other side character that was the main focus of this book was this girl named Sloan, and she's really good with like math and numbers and statistics. And the mystery, I won't say too much, was connected to her in some way. So the person that was leaving all these clues, like the serial killer, was also leaving super intricate like math related stuff, and a lot of that was going over my head a little bit, which ended up bringing my rating down, but just a half star because I still really enjoyed it. It was just, the mystery is just so intricate, but it was confusing. That's basically the gist of what I'm trying to say. But the ending of this book was absolutely crazy, and in my head was spinning, and I was so like, Jennifer Lynn Barnes is such a genius with the way she puts together these books and mysteries and clues, and I cannot wait for the last book and see what they get up to in that one. Then I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I read this because I have Yours Truly and Just for the Summer on my physical TBR. Actually, you can see them right here, but I really wanted to read the books in order, and I think Part of Your World is the first one. I believe they're all like interconnected standalone, so you could read like them all in a different order if you want. But I know that sometimes like characters are developed more in certain books before you get to know them more in like latter books, so I just wanted to read it in order, and I started off with Part of Your World this month, and I ended up giving it 3.75 stars. This one follows our main character Alexis, and she is going home from a funeral, and she sort of crashes into a ditch, and then this man comes up to her and saves her, and this man turns out to be Daniel, who's like this super sweet guy that she starts this thing with, but they both come from really different worlds because she comes from this really elite family of doctors, so she comes from a very wealthy and elite circle, but he is a very much a blue-collar working man. He's from a really small town, very much not like what Alexis is used to with her world. So they kind of start this relationship, but they're also very conflicted because Alexis especially, she doesn't know how she can like combine this man that comes from this very different world with the people in her life that expect so much from her and expect a certain level of, not standard, I don't want to say Daniel doesn't meet their standards, but that's kind of what it is. Like they have a very specific idea of who Alexis should end up with and what she should do with her life. Yeah, that's the gist of their story. I really loved it. The main characters actually have a dual POV in this book, so we follow both Alexis's POV and Daniel's, and I honestly really liked their relationship. I felt like they were actually mature adults. The only thing is I wanted to know a lot more about Daniel. I feel like we got so much on Alexis and her point of view because we she would talk a lot about her past and her family and her expectations, the hospital that she works at, and just everything around her life, her ex, like everything. But with Daniel, we really only got to know things like in the context of Alexis. Like I feel like a lot of his POV was focused around Alexis and like when he got to see her or him thinking about her or just situations like that. I feel like we never really got to like get to know him as much as we got to know Alexis. So I really wish that I knew more about Daniel, because I feel like I would have connected to him a lot more as a character if I knew like so much more about him. But yeah, overall I was really rooting for them. Even during the third act conflict, I feel like it was a very realistic struggle. That's the only reason why I ended up dropping it a little bit, because I feel like we got to know so much more about Alexis than Daniel. But overall I really enjoyed this story. Then I read The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. I'd heard a lot about this book. It's not a book that I have seen like absolutely everywhere, but I've seen it quite a bit and everyone that usually like enjoyed it enough, so I decided to pick it up. I saw it on my Kindle in the unlimited section, but I actually ended up didn't liking it as much as I thought I would. I ended up giving it 2.75 stars. So this book is about this prison healer named Kiva, and she works in this really like dark and sinister and really cruel prison called Zalendov, and she's been there for 10 years kind of serving her sentence. Like being a prison healer is like part of serving her sentence, I guess. And then one day this woman comes in who's like known to be the rebel queen. Basically they live in this kingdom, but there's this rebel movement that's rising and they have a queen. They call her the rebel queen. So one day the rebel queen comes in as a new prisoner, but she's super sick, and her punishment for her like whatever she did was to go through this thing called a trial by ordeal. It's basically a set of like 4 trials based on the 4 elements: water, earth, air, and fire. And it's basically a death sentence. Like no one gets out of it. But since the rebel queen is like super sick, Kiva instead offers herself as the replacement, because she doesn't know much about the rebel queen, but she's told and she knows that for some reason she has to keep her alive. And since she's super sick and she will probably die if she tries to fight herself, she offers herself. This was another trial book where the time between the trials was so dragged out. I felt like the story was so slow, and I definitely felt like this trial did do a better job, or this author did do a better job of creating trials where you're genuinely like wondering how the character is gonna get out of it. But one of my gripes with this book is that the way that Kiva got out of all these trials is never by her own doing. It's always someone coming up and saving her, and I feel like we needed a little bit more agency from the characters for me to feel like she's a capable main character. I don't know. The story structure in general was also pretty predictable. I feel like trials are hard to like deviate in structure, because you kind of have a flow where you start the trials and then you're going through the trials, you're going in the time between the trials, and then you know that something's gonna happen either within the last trial or right after the last trial. So the story structure was pretty predictable, and there didn't seem to be a lot of opposition to the main character's actions. Like Zalendov is supposed to be this like super brutal prison that barely anyone survives, but Kiva seems to be totally fine. Like everyone around her seems to be like giving her more leniency than they would with any other prisoner for some reason. Like for example, all the prison guards are supposed to be like so cruel, and basically the prisoners are their playthings. They like to torture them. But of course the one new prisoner that has come is like super nice for some reason. And then of course she has created some sort of deal with the warden so that the warden, it doesn't hurt her, and she gives him like some information in return. So like it seems like everyone is kind of on her side and no one's really trying to harm her, and I felt like we needed a little bit of that to also create some stakes and some tension throughout the book, like other than the trials. Then I read the entire Heartstopper series, volumes 1 through 5, because I wanted to reread the first 4 before I got to the 5th one. So I'm only going to be talking about the 5th volume in this one, because I feel like I've talked about the other 4 enough. Like truly I never shut up about Heartstopper. But the 5th one, I ended up giving this 4 stars. I thought it was a really great addition to the Heartstopper series. This is a 5-star series for me. Almost every other book I think is 5 stars. The reason I ended up giving this one 4 stars is because I felt like this one was just a little bit more cutesy and wholesome, and just a little bit more surface level than the other like 4. Like a lot of those ended up dealing with really hard and dark topics, and I really appreciated that. This one does deal with topics like, for example, Nick and Charlie are growing up, so they're getting a little bit older. So for example, Nick is about to go to college and he's thinking about that, or I guess in the UK it's university, but he's trying to figure out like where he would want to go and what he would want to do maybe. And also they're getting ready to take the next step in their relationship. They're kind of ready to get more sexual and more physical with their relationship, so they explored that too. I just wish they had a few more things that brought a little bit more depth to the story, but other than that, I loved it. I love Nick and Charlie so much. I love their friend group and the story, and I'm so sad that the last book is coming out, I think this year, but it's gonna be so bittersweet of reading that book. And then I read Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the third book in the Empyrean series, the infamous Fourth Wing series, and of course there's been so much hype for this book. I've been seeing it absolutely everywhere. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I loved Fourth Wing. I think that's such a fantastic and fun like dragon war college fantasy. I did not like Iron Flame at all. I ended up giving it 2 stars, and then this one I ended up giving 3 stars, so kind of in the middle. I have a full spoiler filled reading vlog either out already or coming out soon, and if it's out I'll link it down below. So if you want like more in-depth thoughts on that, I will link that down below. I will be pretty brief here because I have a whole like almost 30-minute vlog I think of like basically me just talking about Onyx Storm. But to kind of wrap up my thoughts nicely in a few points, I thought this book was like a lot of filler. It didn't really feel like much happened, and I just felt like we were talking a lot about doing things rather than actually doing them. And then my other biggest gripe with this book that I cannot get over is that Xaden, I'm gonna spoil Iron Flame by the way, but Xaden becomes Venom in that book, and that's a really big cliffhanger. That's like where we leave off with the story. This one, I thought the Venom-ness and the whole thing with the Venom would actually affect the story. It does not. He basically is pretty normal for most of the book except for the very end. But basically the way the Iron Flame went, like he was pretty normal and then becomes Venom. It's the same in this book. He's pretty normal and then becomes more Venom. Like really him turning Venom was not really a big thing at all for majority of the book, and that left me so frustrated because I'm like, if you left such a big cliffhanger, it didn't even pay off at all because it didn't even come into play until like the very end, exactly like Iron Flame. And this book felt like a bunch of side quests. It felt like they had like, we have this overarching plot I guess of trying to defeat the Venom again, but we have these mini side quests of them trying to find information, trying to find allies, trying to find a darkest kind, and it just felt like that was what this book was, and I just wanted more. Honestly, I don't know how this book or how the series is gonna be 5 books. It already feels like the whole Venom thing is being dragged out a lot. I feel like this series could definitely have been like 3 or 4 books. Maybe not 3 books, but like definitely 4 books, and I feel like we don't need a 5th book. Like I feel like everything we kind of went through in this book could be wrapped up in one other book, and then we should be done with the series. I will still be reading both those books because of course I'm still invested in the story and the plot and Violet and Xaden's relationship. But other than that, it was okay. Like I didn't hate it, I didn't love it either. It was okay. I had a few gripes with it, and I ended up just feeling like wanting more. But those are all the books for the month of January. Such a great start to the year, hoping to keep this momentum going forward. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, as of course I would love to know. But that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye.